Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Last but not the least, we begin the final session of the day, resetting global energy policies and getting the transition back on track. I did ponder over the topic a little bit and wondering, where is the track? What is the track? Is there just one track for transition, or are there multiple tracks? So since this morning in the sessions, we've found out that energy transition has been on quite a rocky road. There have been ups and downs, twists and U-turns all over the world, in the developed world, in developing countries. There have been accelerations and decelerations. Many countries, especially major emerging economies in recent years, have pushed back against the idea of accelerating transition at any cost. There has been growing international acknowledgement at the same time that energy supply security, and we've heard this from our speakers since this morning, supply security, affordability, accessibility are as important as decarbonization and meeting net zero emission goals. There is also a recognition within the developing world itself that there is no one-size-fits-all, but at the same time, as different countries are following what suits them best, a lot of emerging economies are also finding ways to collaborate with each other, learn from each other's experiences, which is what hopefully we will discover a little more on in this session. And of course, then there is the Donald Trump factor, right? A lot of turmoil, turbulence, lot of changes we are seeing happening already in countries in reaction to the stance that the Trump administration is taking in the US with regard to transition. So we have a fantastic representation in this panel of countries with diverse economies, diverse climates, diverse geographies from different parts, corners of the world. And let's talk about how we can learn from each other's experiences. So to introduce my panelists, we have, starting from my immediate left, His Excellency Martin Eyjolfsson, Secretary of State from Iceland, Mr. Tarun Kapoor, Advisor to the PM, Government of India, Mr. Dammu Ravi, Secretary Economic Relations in the Ministry of External Affairs in the Government of India, Mr. Ronaldo Caiado, Governor, State of Goiás in Brazil, and Mr. Agbu Kefas, Governor of Taraba State in Nigeria. Welcome to all my panelists. Let's give them a hand. So, gentlemen, thank you very much again for joining us. Martin, you're closest to me. I'll start with you. So, some things we know about Iceland here. Some things are very well known, thanks to social media, traditional media, and generally this discussion of transition, how different countries are pursuing it differently. The one thing that we do know is that Iceland is a world leader in geothermal energy. So I'd really like to know from you, what can other countries, now of course, do tell us a little more about, like, not all countries are blessed equally with geothermal energy, but those that are, what can they learn from your experience?
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. Yeah, not all countries are blessed with geo. It depends on how deep you drill, you know. If you drill, if you drill deep enough, then everybody all countries are blessed with geothermal.
I see.
And there is a development in deep drilling, but it's not there yet. Our story is basically, Iceland was one of the poorest countries in Europe in the beginning of last century. Mm-hmm. We started utilizing both hydro and geothermal in the 20s, but we really, after World War II, we were basically as dependent on fossil fuels as any other country. And we didn't know that we were sitting on a gold mine. We have geysers and are blessed with geothermal until we had the right technology. And then we started really in the 60s and 70s, developing power and heat systems for the whole country, first for the capital area, then for the rest of the country. What we learned, we needed resources. We were a developing country until 1970. We needed time, resources, scale, but first and foremost, we needed decisions, difficult decisions. It took us 40 years to build up the district heating system in our capital, for example. You have to lay the pipes to every household. So it is costly, but we benefit 3.5 to 4% of our GDP every year. And so this is in short our story, and we are 100% renewable when it comes to electricity and house heating. So courageous decisions, difficult decisions, and there is geothermal in more areas than you think. We are, for example, working here in India with the Ladakh region. We are drilling there. We are also working with Uttarakhand and also in other areas, Himalayas Pradesh, where we are in food production using geothermal energy as well. So this is in a way, there is geothermal energy in more places than you think, and it takes courage to take the right decisions, but they will definitely pay off.
That's interesting. Thank you. Mr. Kapoor, coming to you. India is one of the first countries that started talking about energy trilemma. And very soon it became quite a catchphrase, and it, I think, explained and expressed very well the dilemma that especially the emerging economies, energy-hungry emerging economies were facing. Where would you rate India today in the business or in its progress in balancing the supply security, affordability, and accessibility, and the sustainability part of the equation?
So for countries like India, where our energy demand is growing, we have a large population which is moving up from maybe lower middle class to middle class and then higher, and therefore they need more energy for various domestic purposes like, say, cooking, heating, cooling, all, and then transport also. And then, as you said, affordability. So when people are looking for energy, then they are also looking for energy which is priced correctly, and price volatility is not there. That price volatility which one sees in the international market, probably in a normal household, people can't really absorb. So for us, meeting the growing energy needs and then keeping this balance, it has been a slightly difficult job, but then probably we've looked at all sources of energy. We never said that we will do this or that. So our own resources, as far as fossil fuels are concerned, are limited mostly to coal. But then the transport sector moved in a direction world over where one couldn't do without, say, petrol, diesel, and now maybe natural gas. So we had to import. So currently our imports are huge, almost 85 to 90% of our petrol, diesel, which means that the crude is imported. And we also shifted, for cooking, we shifted to LPG. And LPG also, we thought it would be a good byproduct from our refineries, but then our demand has grown so much that 55% of our requirement again we are importing. So that's where the high imports are there. But on the other side, as far as electricity generation is concerned, we started with lot of coal. Even now we use a lot of coal, but then we are gradually moving towards renewables. So renewables are picking up. We crossed 100 gigawatts of solar just few days back. You must have seen in the news.
Yeah.
And wind, in any case, India was doing well even earlier. Slowed down a bit though. And hydro also we started much earlier, but then hydro takes more time. So all put together, currently in the grid, about 25% of the energy in installed capacity, we are much more. We are about 44%, but in terms of energy also, we are about 25% in the grid. So, so we've looked at our available resources. We've looked at clean fuel to come into our systems more and more, and that's where we've been moving. So, while on one side we have ensured that there are no energy shortages in the country, that during COVID time also India was very successful in ensuring that not only were there no shortages, but for a common man there was no shock also in terms of price, because government absorbed some of the price, or the oil companies absorbed a lot of that price increase internationally which happened. And we ensured that supply was absolutely uninterrupted. And as we move along, we are diversifying and we are trying to tap as many sources as are available. Also, spending money on R&D, experimenting, so that if and when green hydrogen happens, we are there. Biofuels, we are into biofuels in a big way, though compared to the kind of energy needs we have, probably so far biofuels don't contribute much, but then the availability is increasing, and then more exploration within our country and also offshore, so that our domestic production goes up as far as the fossil fuels are concerned, and also looking at cleaner uses of coal, so getting into coal gasification and carbon capture. So basically looking at all areas which are possible.
Yeah, all options.
Yeah.
Not
And then let's see how the R&D in the world moves, how various technologies come in, and then we are there. Our energy needs are there, but the path is also very clear. Given a choice, get into cleaner forms. Nuclear is another, where in this budget you would have heard a very major announcement has been made, where we even said that we will amend our act so that we can get more participation in nuclear energy.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Kefas, coming to you. Nigeria is blessed with solar power, or rather, a lot of sunlight. But I understand equally you also face a lot of challenges in terms of getting financing. Tell us a little more about how you are working around those challenges to use the resources that you do have, the natural resources, to the maximum.
Thank you very much. And coincidentally, my state is one of the states in Nigeria that has very high potentials for solar energy. Unfortunately, Nigeria being one of the biggest countries in Africa with very large population of over 250 million people, the energy supply is grossly inadequate. And recently, the federal government of Nigeria has transferred the responsibility for energy back to the subnationals. So every state is now given that opportunity to develop their own energy. And recently I have, using the Indian model, we try to also set up a policy for that, and it's in place. And we're working very seriously to see how we can make the best use of the energy resources we have, both hydro, solar because of the sunshine, and the waterfalls, and all that is available for us. Like in my state, I have a landmark of about 54,000 square kilometers with slightly above 4 million people population. So we are working very hard, and coming to this particular event is to give me the opportunity to explore further on the energy solution that is globally experienced in the world. And I think I'm a bit more comfortable with the Indian success story, even though they're talking about the dilemma, the energy dilemma. But I think for us, they have moved ahead. And coming here will help us to see how we can develop that to be able to meet the energy requirement for my country. And I'm sure most of my colleagues, the governors of other states, will also key into that ways of finding solution to the energy problem. So we're here to explore further, to interact, and to see what is best. We'll keep trying all. And at the end of the day, we think we'll be able to settle for what is best for us, based on the resources, the energy resources that we have in our own state and country.
So it's very interesting you mentioned the devolution of powers, if I understand you correctly, from the central government to the state governments. I can see how that must come as a huge opportunity. Do the state governments feel equipped with the regulations and the policy? Are you getting enough support from your central government? How is that dynamic working so far?
Yes, actually we have that support, and they've opened up the window for us to explore, to look at any country that have succeeded based on pairing of natural resources that we have, or the energy resources that are available to us, looking at their model to see how we can adopt. So I think it's a very good thing for us, and we can freely move around to adapt our own policy based on our available resources.
Excellent. Yeah. Mr. Ravi, so India has been in some ways in the eye of the storm, especially over the past couple of years, since the Ukraine war, of course, and India emerging as a major importer of Russian crude. But let's talk a little bit about India's international diplomacy in terms of attracting investment into clean energy. What has your experience been on that front so far?
Well, thank you, Vandana, and it's a pleasure to be here again this year. I think we need to understand in the energy in a broader context, and how do we strategize. I think let's be very clear that COVID-19, the geopolitical tensions, and the withdrawal from Paris deal by a few countries is obviously a very stress point on the transition to the clean energy. It causes lots of doubts in the minds of many leaders around the world, and some leaders may say, okay, if others are walking out, we may also walk out. But I think there is a global commitment to the clean energy transition. There's a global commitment to climate change itself, that they're fighting the climate change. And I think there is a need for cohesiveness. Many countries are following different policies, but at the international level, the global level, there is a need to understand what this all means. Traditionally, energy is understood to be something like a growth enabler. Growth It generates growth of the economy. But I think one of the missing point here is actually development. Energy development are so interlinked. And energy that is made available in the developing countries, particularly the global south, has very great significance for uplifting the lives of many people. Now, where does India fit in? In my view, India is very much well placed to lead this change and to enable and help countries in the global transition of the energies. Now, we know that in recent times, the consumer demands have gone up. The number of people who are in that group are actually 4 billion, and it's doubled in 2 decades' time. There has been a shift also from the transatlantic energy demands to Asia. There is a lot of consumption of energy here in Asia. So how do you balance between fossil fuels to the clean energies that are developing here? I think policies have to address this, but how India can take that challenge, first of all, in my view, manufacturing will need to closer to markets. India today at 400 gigawatts of energy capacity of development, production. If you look at it, it's a target of $30 trillion. That would be X into 4, 5. So the demand for energy in India will be huge. Commensurate with that goal and objective and the vision ahead, we are going to see manufacturing of the clean energy technologies increasing. So in other words, the matrix of India has changed significantly. So which is why today we are less dependent on oil imports, although fossil fuels are still important. But the mission mode manufacturing that is happening in the solar, in the biofuels, in the nuclear, green hydrogen, it's going to be a big game changer in the way of energy. So from here, we will have to, again, not lose the sight of what we need to do at the global level for the global south, particularly in the UNFCCC, the debate on the financial commitments of the developed countries to the global south is a very important thing, and India has been taking the lead in it. The loss and damage fund, the G20 action plan on the clean energy, very important. We need to see action there. But the bilateral front, India has done a lot. You have the India-US initiative on the clean energy transition technologies. With Europe, you have the Trade and Technology Council. And in the plurilateral context, we have the Partnership for Critical Mineral Security, which is, again, a very important thing. But we have to understand what is the danger ahead, which is actually concentration of supply chains in the clean energy technologies. So any one particular country, one region is concentrating that, it's a danger. It can be disruptive for the entire world. So we have to have a diplomatic engagement at all levels to ensure that the debate does not lose sight of the importance of the countries of the global south and how to enable them to move into the transition to clean energies. Thank
Indeed. So saying this myself as an Indian, this may appear biased, but I think it's pretty evident to me. I think the world has recognized India's role in articulating the vision of the global south, how the energy transition has to be balanced with affordability and accessibility. Governor Ronaldo, I'll come to you. Brazil has been a major adopter of biofuels. In fact, as I spoke about Iceland leading in geothermal, biofuels and Brazil are almost synonymous with each other. What, in your view, can countries, not just India, but other countries, learn from Brazil's experience in pushing biofuels use?
Primeiro, muito obrigado por poder participar de painel de tamanha relevância hoje, de assunto que hoje domina e que exige muito de nós como descarbonizar, como realmente produzir fontes limpas de energia. É inquestionável que hoje o Brasil, em decorrência também de situações anteriores, desenvolveu o avanço do etanol. O que nós vimos aqui neste painel, a Islândia, como aqui a Índia, Nigéria, cada país trazendo ali a sua capacidade de poder apresentar uma fonte limpa para poder desenvolver o biocombustível. O Brasil, como a Índia, nós somos de um clima tropical, diferente aqui de muitos outros países que têm um clima temperado, e com isso nós temos uma capacidade de produção de 3 safras ano, algo relativamente inédito dentro do avanço que nós temos hoje das condições climáticas e também da irrigação. Com isto, nós desenvolvemos uma prática que foi a produção do etanol. Com a produção do etanol, nós hoje já temos os carros hoje todos com combustível flex, ou seja, o uso da gasolina ou o uso única e exclusivamente do etanol. Avançamos em parceria com a Shell, uma empresa brasileira chamada Raizen, desenvolveu o etanol segunda geração. O etanol segunda geração ele é 100% produzido pelo bagaço da cana, ou seja, não se amplia a área de produção, não se amplia o cultivo da cana. Aquela mesma área passa a produzir mais 50% em decorrência da tecnologia, do avanço em termos do etanol segunda geração, que é o caminho mais próximo para podermos desenvolver também o SAF, que é a energia limpa para a aviação. Então, o Brasil tem concentrado muito neste trabalho e para o transporte pesado, nós iniciamos um processo já bem articulado também com todas as usinas no nosso país para o avanço da produção do biometano. E com o biometano, aí nós atenderíamos toda a escala do transporte com fontes renováveis. E o biometano tanto viria também da cana, como também viria de resíduos animais. Isto aí seria uma fonte, ou projetamos uma fonte importante para podermos cada vez mais diminuir o consumo de combustíveis fósseis no país e fazer uma política de descarbonização com resultados reais. É lógico que cada país, como por exemplo a Islândia, busca o que tem uma usina térmica lá por questões naturais, não é? A Nigéria também tem quedas d'água. A Índia se assemelha muito com o Brasil, ou seja, com o nosso potencial de produção da matéria orgânica, ou seja, matéria limpa, capaz de avançar cada vez mais nessa oferta de biocombustíveis para o mundo. A parceria com a Índia, neste momento, ela é extremamente importante pela experiência que o país tem no cultivo da cana e também pela alta produtividade que tem. É uma integração entre dois países que mostram hoje que, inegavelmente, a saída para podermos apresentar uma solução para o mundo, a fonte de bioenergia, de biocombustível, ela passa a ser um desafio muito grande para nós. O Brasil também é rico em combustíveis fósseis, com o pré-sal, mas cada vez mais nós estamos acelerando a tecnologia do etanol e também do biogás e do biometano.
Thank you. It's time to drop that one word or phrase that hasn't yet appeared in this conference, artificial intelligence, AI. It's all over the news. Martin, I'll come back to you for this. So Iceland is positioning itself as a prime location for data centers. I think blessed with cooler climate, I think that's an obvious advantage. But the other one, as you mentioned earlier, nearly 100% of electricity is now green electricity, essentially. It's from geothermal and so on. Tell us a little more about how you're progressing your country's aim to attract, to become a sort of a global hub for data centers.
Yeah, global hub is maybe too big of a word, but a hub. We have been developing that for quite many years, and as you mentioned, it's often not very convenient to live in Iceland because of cold weather, but the advantage is that we need less energy in cooling down the data storage centers and data centers. So that's one thing, definitely, and the green energy, of course. Political stability is as well one thing that we stress. The business environment, there is small but effective administration, little red tape, incentives to some extent as well. And yeah, we have managed to lure companies to us, and we have like a Nordic footprint there and hub. So, but of course there are also limits to it. So we will never be the world hub we mentioned, but still we will continue and also diversify. We have today the power-intensive industries very prevalent in our economy. Their contracts are expiring in the near future, and that also frees up energy in order to lure more data centers and companies into our country.
So if you're successful in attracting a lot of data centers into your country, do you think you'll still be able to produce enough geothermal energy, enough green power to keep that balance still, remain a predominantly green powerhouse?
Yes, but it's also, building a power plant, be it hydro, geothermal, wind, it's also politically controversial. It's never a one-way street in that sense. So we have to strike this balance. But we have a new government in Iceland that has robust and vigorous plans to produce more green energy in Iceland.
Thank you. Mr. Kapoor, you spoke about India's very inclusive approach to just not ruling out anything, taking everything into the basket. But if I may, if you were to look out into the next 15 to 20 years, you spoke about coal. Tell us a little more about natural gas, because I think there is a distinction here, and Mr. Puri this morning pointed out that natural gas is actually a very clean source of energy. And there is growing pressure on India to try and reduce its coal use. But at the same time, while India has abundant coal reserves, gas means it's going to become even more import dependent. How do you see the role of natural gas playing out in India?
So in India, currently we are using natural gas in our refineries to produce, then second to produce fertilizers, then we are using partly in the industry, and of course transport, we are pushing CNG quite a bit, and we also want piped natural gas for homes. Then maybe power generation in the coming future, though currently we are not using natural gas much. We have about 25,000 megawatts of installed capacity for power, but most of that is not being used because of the price problem. So going forward, as we look at the energy transition scenario, the way it's building up in India, I would say that a transition for transport to natural gas appears natural. So we will have probably more natural gas run, maybe cars and buses and even trucks or even LNG trucks for that matter. And more natural gas in industry, replacing somewhere wherever coal can be replaced, or maybe some other forms of fossil fuel, or including say heavier molecules from the petroleum side. So an increased use of natural gas, I think, will happen in the country. There is no doubt about it.
What needs to happen on the, sorry to interject, but India's price sensitive when it comes to natural gas, right? What needs to happen? We know that there is a lot of new LNG capacity coming on stream from 27, 28. A lot of people say that that may bring down prices enough for India to be able to grow its LNG imports much more. What do
Yeah,
you
so
see happening?
that is the point I was coming to. But it will all depend on price of gas. Now, after COVID, our gas consumption actually went down. So we were at 6.7% in our energy mix. We went down to 6.3 or 6.2%. It happened because of high price. For fertilizer, we have no choice. So we have to take natural gas, even if it is expensive. But for others, then there are alternatives. So naturally, it's a free economy, so the users then shift to cheaper alternatives. So if the price goes down as is expected, maybe 26, 27, that's what people say, that the price will go down further and then it will remain stable at least for next 10 years or so, and then again it may start going up. We never know. I don't know, you are the expert, you would be able to predict. But at a price level of say $8 or lower, the affordability for power generation also comes in. So using gas-based stations for grid balancing vis-a-vis using battery storage, so that's the point where a huge demand can come in. Then the industry shifting to natural gas in, say, for example, maybe coal or steel, or maybe certain uses. Natural gas can't fit in everywhere, but at least in certain uses it can. So that could again give a slightly bigger demand. And then shifting our cooking to natural gas. This is something we want. We want to shift from LPG to natural gas.
Okay.
But it's taking time. It will happen. So I think the demand for natural gas in the country will certainly go up. There is no doubt about it. But the price has to remain stable, which most probably will. We will have more discoveries within the country also. That also we are quite sure of. We have the resource, and then putting in biogas, as was mentioned by Brazil. So our own biogas, compressed biogas production should go up. So at least 10% of our needs should come from biogas also.
Sure, yeah. Agbu, we talked about Nigeria blessed with a lot of sunlight, solar power. Investing is one part, getting funds, investment is one part of the equation. The other is grid compatibility, especially when we talk about solar power generation. So what are some of the challenges you are encountering when it comes to grid and infrastructure, power infrastructure in Nigeria, and how do you plan to get around it?
Well, just like you said, the shift to the alternative energy, in as much as it creates opportunities, it also has these challenges you're talking about, funding and the shift. For us right now, I wouldn't say we are shifting, but rather we are complementing, trying to use the solar, use all other alternatives to complement the national grid, the hydro, even though there are challenges of funding. But what majorly we are trying to do right now is to collaborate. As we've identified countries with their success stories like India, Brazil is coming up, Iceland and all. So we are comparing and then trying to reach out, trying to collaborate to see how we can be able to take charge of the energy sector. Because right now, we are really battling with it.
Mr. Ravi, so you hear what Mr. Agbu is saying about collaboration. As I mentioned, and you were laying out nicely in your earlier response, India has played a key role in redirecting, reshaping, recrafting this international dialogue around transition. I'm really curious to hear, do you think the job is done in terms of what more India needs to do, being a voice not just for India, other major emerging economies, but global South as a whole? Or what is on your wish list? What more would you like to see India continue doing on the international stage?
Thank you. I think broadly, I see both opportunities and challenges. But let's see the challenges first. I think the challenges, the first thing I see, the perspectives are very different in the way the West looks at it and the global South looks at it. So how do you narrow the gap? And that's the problem. Unless you narrow the gap, the transfer of technologies won't happen that easily. The financial commitments won't flow from the north to the south. So that's the first challenge you'll face. So we need to continue to work on that. Second is, which is why when you think about energy, you're thinking in terms of consumption. Emissions is one thing that comes to mind. How do you, again, build that narrative of mission life? So Prime Minister's vision, mission life, has become so important because you have to address also the excessive consumptions that may not be necessary in some parts of the world. How do you balance that? The third factor that I bring to is actually the market access issue. The CBAM is a great challenge. For countries in the global south to be able to export to the Western European countries, CBAM is a big hurdle. In other sense, I also see the Inflation Reduction Act, which also restricts manufacturing happening in developing countries. So there are hurdles that we'll have to see. The fifth point is actually funding. The financial flows that are required to build capacities in the global south won't come because the risks are too high, perceived to be very high. Now, where does India step in? In my view, in the recent times, we have taken lead on developing the narrative is one part, and also actually doing it in action. The International Solar Alliance is one very interesting platform in which Global South are able to, and also Global North, are able to talk together and bring that narrative closer on the need for having a common approach to fighting climate change. Second is the CDRI, Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure. The third is the Biofuel Alliance. These are significant initiatives that brings global community on platforms that are able to think and have a common approach. Now, in my view, that's still not enough, because if India have to play a meaningful role, a constructive role, we have to be in countries like in Africa. Because I feel today African per unit consumption cost is so high. Can we play a role in bringing down that cost? Whether gigawatt scale of solar energy that we have successfully introduced in India, can we introduce it in Africa and bring down the cost there? But this is, again, a challenge is how do you convince in a political economy that a short-term pain for a long-term gain? Now, this is, again, going to be a big thing. So we have to bring in financial flows into the global south, particularly in Africa. Indian entrepreneurship is well geared to take the position. So gigawatt scale of energy that we can produce, clean energy, and be able to provide it at affordable cost. But then there's a lot of homework. Convincing the political leadership. Second is also liberalizing the markets, because you not have a cross-border trading to be able to do that at that scale. The third and most important thing is reform of the regulatory frameworks. So this is all work in progress, but I believe there is a lot is happening. Already I see Indian entrepreneurship taking that step in the solar, rooftop solar. They're doing solar parks, and the next step, we will be actually looking at biofuels also. So we're pushing the entrepreneurship into the global south to actually taking that entrepreneurship lead. Thank you.
Okay. So I have to ask you this. President Trump's withdrawal of the US from the Paris Climate Accord, what do you think, if any, change or shift that brings to how the world approaches transition?
Well, in my view, a big country like that, when it withdraws from an important deal where global community have already committed to fight the climate change, it immediately brings diffidence and also puts doubts in the mind. So it also then instigates others to also perhaps be less committed to the clean transition and the fight against global change. But I think the world has come to a stage where it's come to believe that their stakes are very high in maintaining a clean transition and the fight against climate change. I think that will not go away. We will see aberrations. We will see this kind of voices coming and going. But I think the world is committed and significantly plugged in to that goal of clean transition. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I think I'm gleaning from how the perception is in the international community as well. Thank you for that. I'll come back to you, Ronaldo. You mentioned second-generation biofuels. This is something that I'm personally very curious about as well, because back almost 10 years ago, when a lot of the other countries, Brazil was already into biofuels, when a lot of the other countries started looking at biofuels, there was a raging debate about this crops for food versus crops for fuel. And to my mind, to some extent, that debate still continues to this day. You mentioned sugarcane molasses, which in some ways takes care of that food versus fuel debate. You mentioned biomethane from sugarcane as well, and other agricultural products. But again, tell us a little bit more about how you are going about resolving this conflict of crops for food versus crops for fuel.
Bom, primeiro, acho que é importante que possamos debater este assunto com muito conhecimento de causa. Muitas vezes, alguns países europeus tentam vender uma tese de que nós estaríamos ali diminuindo a oferta de alimentos, sendo que o Brasil, nos últimos 40 anos, ele saiu de uma produção de 60 milhões de toneladas de grãos para 320 milhões de toneladas de grãos, onde a nossa área ocupada hoje para a agricultura e pecuária atinge apenas 10,5% do território nacional. Um país de 8 milhões e 500 mil quilômetros quadrados, apenas 10%, 10,5%, ele é utilizado para poder fazer com que haja produção hoje, com altíssima tecnologia. O Brasil tem a característica, como vocês na Índia, de nós podermos fazer 3 safras ano. É algo que só os países tropicais conseguem fazer tudo isso. É lógico que a terceira safra é uma safra irrigada. E, além do mais, para poder desmistificar a tese de que nós estaríamos competindo com áreas, nós temos também uma legislação muito forte de zoneamento de áreas de plantio de cana em nosso país. Nós temos um código florestal, que é o mais rígido do mundo, onde nós temos lá a preservação de todos os nossos biomas e, além do mais, nós estamos a cada dia avançando. As fontes de energia elétrica em nosso país, 100% renovável hoje, e a parte de combustível, nós temos aí o pré-sal, com altíssima produtividade, mas que, dentro daquilo que foi colocado, existe um compromisso nosso de fazer essa alternância da fonte para poder buscar essa descarbonização, essa política mundial, que todos nós estamos envolvidos nela, o Brasil consegue, com tecnologia hoje, poder fazer com que a nossa produção de etanol chegue hoje a 38 bilhões de litros ano. Com a segunda geração, nós teremos a capacidade de produzir mais 19 bilhões de litros ano sem ampliar 1 centímetro da área plantada que tem hoje no país. Então, isto é o avanço da pesquisa que já está produzindo no estado de São Paulo. A terceira usina está sendo montada em Goiás, onde nós já mostramos esse potencial, e daí o potencial maior, que é de caminharmos para o SAF, como todas as pesquisas mostram, ser a fonte capaz de poder produzir para atender a demanda mundial. E quando nós falamos em hidrogênio verde, também as pesquisas estão demonstrando que é do etanol a melhor fonte para se ter o melhor resultado. Ou seja, nós teríamos no mesmo carro que é híbrido, ele poder fazer a locomoção com etanol ou com gasolina, e amanhã também, do etanol, fazer a transformação para o hidrogênio verde. Então, são áreas que nós estamos desenvolvendo muito e mostrando que nós não precisamos, de acordo com aquilo que é a característica de cada país, como na Islândia, tem uma característica, e eles têm uma fonte natural que eles desenvolvem para ter essa estrutura. Nós trabalhamos muito o biometano amanhã, o biogás, para nós montarmos estruturas de data centers, onde nós teremos ali o consumo em loco, com oferta de uma fonte de energia 100% renovável. Então, muitas vezes discuto, porque não é a imposição de energia pela utilização de baterias elétricas. Tudo bem, reconheço, mas dentro daquilo que é o potencial de produção do Brasil e da Índia e outros países com clima tropical, a origem para poder ter o combustível renovável vai ser uma fonte que nós temos em grande abundância, ou seja, que é a cana, e aí nós temos também, hoje vocês desenvolvem aqui também do arroz, tá certo? Do milho e tudo isso. Então, eu acho que cada país vai poder demonstrar o que é mais barato, o que é possível ser consumido pelo mundo, e, ao mesmo tempo, mostrando que a área também, os países manufaturados, também dê oportunidade para que a indústria flex também possa chegar a todo mundo, e com isso nós podemos atender a demanda.
Thank you so much. I learned so much, and I'm sure as did our audience. It's fascinating developments in Brazil.